I was 25 when it started. The sharp, relentless contractions that tore through my body, stealing my breath with every wave. My stomach clenched like a fist, and sweat dripped down my temples as I staggered into the living room, gripping the edge of the couch for support. My parents were there, lounging as if nothing mattered, eyes glued to the flickering television screen. "Please," I gasped, clutching the arm of the sofa as a contraction doubled me over. "I need to go to the hospital. The baby, she's coming." My father barely looked up, his expression a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "Now? Seriously? Couldn't this wait? I'm in the middle of something important." My mother sipped her wine, tilting her head with a smug smile. "Why should we leave our evening plans for your mess? You made this choice. Deal with it yourself." Pain exploded through me again, sharper this time, bending me at the knees. I could barely stand. I can't do this alone. Please, just this once. Help me." His hand shot out, grabbing my arm with a force that made me wince. "We're not your chauffeurs. Don't make a mess here. Should have thought about that before making this mess." I froze, shock and pain colliding, my vision swimming. Their words were colder than the night air that hit me when they shoved me toward the door. I stumbled outside, the driveway stretching endlessly under the streetlights. My phone had died hours ago, and there was no one to call. No taxi, no friend, no mercy. Just me, my body racked with pain, and the sharp gravel digging into my knees as I collapsed. Cars passed, indifferent, their headlights slicing through the darkness, their drivers unaware of the small, terrified figure on the roadside. I screamed, my voice raw and trembling, but the world didn't stop. No one stopped. I felt utterly alone, abandoned by the people who had sworn to protect me, by the people who were supposed to be my family. Then, a shadow loomed over me. A passerby had seen me fall, a stranger who didn't know me from anyone else, yet somehow cared more than the people who bore my blood. The stranger's hands were gentle, steady, guiding me to lie down, whispering reassurances as if I were more than a helpless girl on the street. The ambulance arrived, lights flashing, sirens piercing the night. I was lifted into the warmth of the vehicle, my body trembling, my heart pounding, not just from the contractions, but from a mix of relief and disbelief. My baby, I had to survive. Somehow I had to survive. As the siren wailed through the empty streets, I realized the bitter truth. My parents had left me to die. They had turned their backs when I begged, when I pleaded for help, when I was moments away from bringing life into the world. I had been their daughter, yet they treated me like a stranger. In that dark, cold night, I made a vow to myself. I would not fall apart. I would not crawl back begging for forgiveness or mercy. I would survive. For me, for my child, for the life that depended on me. And one day, they would see what their cruelty had sown, and it would not be what they expected. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights, sirens, and pain that seemed to echo through every bone in my body. But amidst it all, there was a spark, a determination that burned hotter than the contractions, fiercer than the cold night that had thrown me into the street. I was not broken. I would not be broken, and this was only the beginning. When I opened my eyes, the world was stark white. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled my nose, sharp and overwhelming, and the constant beeping of monitors echoed through the quiet room. I blinked, my body heavy and sore, stitched in places I didn't even realize had been cut. A nurse hovered beside me, her hands gentle as she adjusted the monitors on my arm. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You collapsed on the street. Someone saw you, called an ambulance. You and your baby, you're stable." I swallowed hard, my throat raw from screaming and sobbing. Stable?
The word sounded fragile in my mind, but it carried a lifeline. I turned slowly, panic clawing at me, until I saw her, my daughter, tiny and delicate, wrapped in a soft blanket in a clear bassinet. Her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, her little face peaceful, unaware of the chaos that had brought her here. Tears streamed down my face as relief crashed over me in waves, so strong that I shook with the force of it. She was alive! My baby had survived! But beneath that relief was a jagged edge of anger, sharp and burning. My parents had left me, left her, to face the night alone. I had begged, I had pleaded, and they had turned away. And yet here she was, my little miracle, breathing in the warmth of the hospital room, while they remained cold and indifferent in the outside world. I named her Hope, for it was all she represented: the future, life, survival. Holding her in my arms for the first time, the weight of her tiny body against my chest, I felt two conflicting emotions: an unshakable, overwhelming love, and a searing, undeniable fury. Every gentle breath she took reminded me of what my parents had refused to provide, what strangers had generously given in my absence. Their absence became a constant driving force behind every decision I made, every plan I began to form. And as I held Hope, feeling her tiny fingers wrap around mine, her sleepy eyes blink slowly open to meet mine, I understood that survival wasn't enough. I would ensure that the cruelty that had marked my birth into motherhood would not go unanswered. I would rise from the pain, and they would face the truth of what they had done. Hope slept peacefully against my chest that night, and I whispered a silent promise. We're safe now. We'll survive. And one day, you'll see that your grandmother and grandfather are not the people I thought they were. The hospital saved us physically, but it was the fire that burned within me that would save us in the long run. Every act of neglect, every callous word from my parents became fuel for a quiet, patient plan, a plan that would ensure that when the time came, the world would witness the truth, our truth.
The weeks after the hospital were a blur of pain, recovery, and sleepless nights. My body was healing, but my mind refused to rest. Every stitch, every ache, every sleepless hour with Hope in my arms reminded me of that cold night, the night my parents had shoved me into the darkness while I begged for help. The memory of their smirks and dismissive voices played like a movie I could not turn off. And yet, amidst the pain, I found strength. Each day as I held Hope, I realized I was no longer just surviving. I was learning, growing, becoming someone they could never break. Their abandonment had ignited a fire inside me, a determination that burned brighter than any fear. I began documenting everything: their cruel words, their neglect, their lies. Every act of kindness from strangers became a benchmark, a reminder of what real care looked like. I started small. I accepted help from neighbors who brought food, from nurses who checked on me without judgment. Each gesture was a quiet rebellion against the cruelty I had endured. I savored every moment of love that did not come from them, storing it in my heart like a shield. And while I appreciated these strangers, I knew they could not replace what I had been denied. Meanwhile, my parents continued with their lives as if nothing had happened. At the grocery store, whispers reached me, how proud they were of Jessica, hosting bridge nights, bragging about her achievements. They never mentioned me, never acknowledged Hope. Their arrogance was breathtaking. They believed ignoring us would erase our existence, but it only strengthened my resolve. I realized then that revenge didn't have to be loud or hasty. It could be quiet, patient, strategic.
I would not confront them in anger. I would let the world witness their true nature. Every slight, every insult, every act of neglect would be collected, cataloged, and preserved. Their pride, their carefully curated image of perfection, would become their undoing. And the opportunity came sooner than expected. My parents had been chosen to host the neighborhood's annual dinner, a gathering meant to flaunt their social status and their perfect family. They were consumed with pride, polishing their home, preparing the finest food, and rehearsing their smiles. In their obsession with appearances, they had unwittingly left the stage for me. I spent days planning. I studied their routines, learned who would attend, and thought about how to reveal the truth without chaos, without putting hope at risk. My plan had to be flawless. They had taught me the lesson of cruelty, but I would respond with intelligence, patience, and precision. Holding hope, I would not only protect her, I would also ensure that the people who had abandoned us would face the world's judgment. Every whispered insult, every dismissive gesture, every cruel word would be exposed. Their pride, their carefully curated image of perfection, would become their undoing. And the opportunity came sooner than expected. My parents had been chosen to host the neighborhood's annual dinner, a gathering meant to flaunt their social status and their perfect family. They were consumed with pride, polishing their home, preparing the finest food, and rehearsing their smiles. In their obsession with appearances, they had unwittingly left the stage for me. I spent days planning. I studied their routines, learned who would attend, and thought about how to reveal the truth without chaos, without putting hope at risk. My plan had to be flawless. They had taught me the lesson of cruelty, but I would respond with intelligence, patience, and precision. Holding hope, I would not only protect her, I would also ensure that the people who had abandoned us would face the world's judgment. Every whispered insult, every dismissive gesture, every cruel word would be exposed. Their pride, their carefully curated image of perfection, would become their undoing. In that quiet room, with the hum of the monitor and Hope's soft breathing, I felt a calm determination settle over me. I was no longer a victim. I was a mother, a protector, and a strategist. And I would not rest until my parents' arrogance had met the reality of their cruelty.
2 months had passed since that horrifying night, and I had grown stronger with each day. Hope was thriving in my care, her tiny fingers curling around mine, her soft breath steady as she slept. Every act of neglect my parents had shown was etched into my memory, fueling a quiet, simmering plan. They had believed ignoring me would erase me, but I had learned patience, strategy, and the power of timing. The night had arrived, the neighborhood dinner, a showcase of my parents' so-called perfect life. Their house gleamed, every surface polished to perfection, every wineglass sparkling like a gem. Mom fussed over the table, arranging her china, adjusting the silverware with meticulous care. Dad busied himself over the grill outside, boasting about the finest steaks and sauces, making sure everyone knew that their home was the pinnacle of sophistication. And Jessica, their golden child, moved about the house, rehearsing her new job lines, smiling smugly at the compliments flowing from every direction. They were so consumed with appearances that they had overlooked one critical detail. I was already there. I entered quietly, my daughter in my arms, her warm breath calm and rhythmic. I could feel her tiny heartbeat against mine, a reassuring reminder that everything I had endured, the pain, the rejection, the sleepless nights, had led to this moment. The guests arrived in clusters, laughing, greeting one another, oblivious to the tension that now filled the air. Their voices were loud, but I barely heard them. I focused on the plan, the quiet satisfaction building as I approached the room where my parents were hosting their parade of pride. Dad raised his voice to toast Jessica, speaking with the authority of a man proud of his family's image. Mom smiled, nodding to the neighbors, basking in the admiration. They had no idea the storm was already in their midst. I stepped forward, carrying Hope close, her eyes wide with curiosity, her tiny hand brushing against my chest. Whispers swept through the crowd. Some knew me, some didn't, but all recognized the tension, the unexpected presence of a daughter who had been absent for so long. Dad's face darkened instantly, his brows furrowed in alarm. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low, dangerous. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is not your night. Leave before you embarrass yourself." I did not step back. I did not flinch. Instead, I reached into my bag and brought out the tablet I had hidden, connecting it to the projector they had prepared for Jessica's slideshow. The screen flickered to life, and then it began. The audio clips I had recorded, their voices sharp, cruel, and unmistakable. Gasps echoed through the room. The words, their laughter, their cold dismissals of me and my daughter filled every corner. Mom's face drained of color, Dad's jaw tightened, the guests shifted, some covering their mouths, others whispering to one another. The mask my parents had spent years crafting was cracking in real time. Jessica's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face as she tried to intervene. "This is taken out of context," she stammered. I stepped in front of her, shielding Hope. "They meant every word," I said steadily. "The night I went into labor, I begged for help. They left me on the roadside. A stranger saved me and my child. Not them. Never them." The room fell into stunned silence. Whispers turned to murmurs of disgust. Neighbors exchanged glances. Colleagues recorded videos. And the proud hosts I had once feared now trembled under the weight of exposure. I adjusted Hope in my arms and allowed a small, satisfied smile to cross my face. This was more than revenge. It was truth. And the world was watching. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector and Hope's soft breathing in my arms. Every guest had stopped in their tracks, eyes fixed on a screen where my parents' cruel words played again and again. Each clip was undeniable. The laughter, the dismissive comments, the callous disregard for my pain. The veneer of perfection that my parents had spent decades polishing was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Mom's hands trembled as she lunged toward the projector, desperation and rage flashing across her face. "Turn it off! This isn't fair!" she screamed, her voice breaking. Dad's face darkened, his shoulders stiffening as he glared at me. "You think you can humiliate us like this? Do you realize what you're doing?" I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I stood firmly, Hope resting safely against my chest, her tiny face serene amidst the chaos. "This is what you did," I said steadily, my voice cutting through the tension. "You left me on the roadside in labor. You refused to help your grandchild. You laughed while strangers cared more than your own blood. And tonight, everyone is seeing the truth." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors shook their heads, whispering among themselves. Colleagues pulled out phones, capturing every moment. Dad's boss, who had arrived earlier, stood stiffly, shaking his head in disbelief. "So this is who you really are," he said, his voice low and disappointed. Jessica, trying to salvage the situation, stumbled forward. "It's taken out of context. You don't understand." I raised my hand, gently shielding Hope, and cutting off her protest. "They meant every word. And tonight, you all see what they truly are." Mom sank back against the polished table, her face pale, lips quivering. She had spent her life building an image of perfection, but now it was shattered. The neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads, others murmuring words of sympathy toward me. Dad's attempts at authority fell flat. His voice, once booming and intimidating, was now drowned out by the weight of exposure.
I walked slowly around the room, letting the murmurs reach my ears, letting the truth settle into every corner. Hope, unaware of the tension, cooed softly, and I smiled down at her. She was alive, she was safe, and she was mine. The night unfolded like a reckoning. Guests approached me quietly, offering words of support and understanding. People I had never met acknowledged the courage it took to stand here, to reveal the truth. And for every whisper of sympathy, my parents' faces sank lower, their arrogance collapsing under the gaze of those who had once admired them. Dad's boss finally spoke again, more firmly this time. I don't ever want to see you in my shop again. I want nothing to do with anyone who treats family this way. Mom tried to protest, her voice shaking, but no one listened. The room had shifted. She was no longer the gracious hostess, no longer the proud mother. She was just a woman exposed, her cruelty laid bare for the world to see. I adjusted Hope in my arms, feeling her heart beat against mine, steady and strong. This was the climax of years of neglect, humiliation, and betrayal. I had not only survived, but I had also revealed the truth in a way that words alone could never convey. My parents had left me on the roadside to suffer, and tonight the world had witnessed their actions. As I turned toward the door, whispers of courage, bravery, and unbelievable followed me. Hope nuzzled against my chest, tiny fingers curling around my shirt. I had reclaimed our narrative. I had shown that love, determination, and truth could triumph over cruelty, arrogance, and neglect. And as I walked into the cool night air, leaving the chaos behind, I realized something profound. The road to this moment had been painful, lonely, and exhausting, but it had also been necessary. For Hope, for me, and for the undeniable truth that no one can dictate the worth of a life or the strength of a mother's love.
The night of reckoning was over, but the echoes of truth lingered. My parents' carefully curated facade lay in ruins, and the neighborhood dinner, once their stage for pride, had transformed into a silent courtroom where their cruelty was judged by all who witnessed it. But as I stepped into the quiet aftermath, holding Hope close, I realized the true victory was not in exposing them. It was in reclaiming our lives, in finding strength where once there had been despair. The days that followed were peaceful, almost surreal. Hope and I settled into a rhythm that was all our own. Each morning, I watched her tiny face light up with innocent wonder, her first smiles, her first coos, each one a reminder of resilience, of life prevailing over cruelty. I felt a deep, unshakable pride, not for myself alone, but for the small, miraculous person who had survived against the odds. The world outside our walls seemed calmer, too. Neighbors greeted me with nods of respect and warmth, some offering help with groceries or small gifts for Hope. It was in these small gestures that I realized the vast difference between kindness, born from love, and the empty arrogance of my parents. I no longer needed their approval nor their presence in our lives. They had lost the power to dictate our story. Occasionally, I thought of them, not with fear, not with longing, but with clarity. They were human, flawed and cruel, and their actions had consequences. The public humiliation had been a mirror reflecting the truth, a truth they could neither escape nor deny. And in this clarity, I found freedom. Their absence no longer hurt, it liberated me. I focused on building a future for Hope and myself. Every decision, every plan was guided by love, safety, and ambition. I enrolled in classes to further my skills, determined to create a life of independence and security. Every late night spent studying, every small victory was a promise to Hope that she would grow in a world of love, not neglect. As the months passed, I watched her grow stronger, her personality unfolding like a flower in spring.
She laughed easily, cried only when necessary, and clung to me with trust that had been earned through care and unwavering protection. Each milestone, her first steps, her first words, was a celebration not only of life, but of triumph. We had survived the impossible, and we were thriving. And yet, I never forgot the lessons from the darkness. The strength I had discovered, the determination that had carried me through the storm, remained a part of me. I taught Hope resilience, not through fear or anger, but through example. She would grow knowing that love, patience, and courage could overcome neglect, that her worth was never to be dictated by those who failed to see it. In the quiet evenings, I often held her close, watching her sleep, marveling at the small, perfect life I had nurtured against impossible odds. The world outside might be cruel, people might fail, and families might fracture. But in our little bubble, there was safety, there was love, and there was hope. And sometimes when I thought back to the night they left me on the roadside, I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. We had survived that night, endured every moment of pain and rejection, and emerged not broken, but unshakable. My parents' choices no longer had power over us. The future was ours. Hope stirred in my arms, a soft coo escaping her lips, and I whispered, "We made it, little one. We're safe. We're free. And together we'll face the world on our own terms." The sun rose the next morning, bathing our home in warm light. For the first time in my life, I felt unburdened by fear, unchained from the past. The nightmare of abandonment was behind us. Ahead lay a horizon filled with possibilities where love, courage, and determination would guide every step we took. And in that horizon, Hope and I were unstoppable. We had survived the night, conquered the pain, and found a new dawn. And this time, we would never look back.